He's a Grammy Award-winning artist. He won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. He's a leading voice and activist on issues of education, criminal justice reform, the founder of Free America, and a friend of the pod, John Legend. Thank you.
Hello, where should I sit? Right over there. All right. Hello, everybody. It's so good to be here.
So good to have you.
Yeah,
I feel like we're friends in my head. Because you're actually, in my head a lot of times when I'm at the gym and whatnot.
Really?
But it's nice to finally meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
Very similar in person. We tone it down on stage.
Unfortunately, the on the pod and the off the pod is so similar that our fiancés, wives, and boyfriends don't love it. But, what are you going to do? Okay. So, John, you are an advocate for criminal justice reform. You spent... It's an issue that there's not a big political...
Me and Jared Kushner.
Yeah, you and Jared.
Well, he's motivated by self-interest.
We have a lot we want to do together in collaboration. We want to really tackle this problem. I think he wants to tackle it in time for his indictment. But
Yes. Strange bedfellows.
It's funny. It all comes full circle because his father gave the $4 million to Harvard before he applied. And similarly, Jared is trying to create a comfortable space for himself in the future.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
The Kushner wing of the penitentiary.
That's how real grown-up affirmative action works.
Right.
That's the original affirmative action.
So you didn't just start working on this issue. You spent a year touring the country, visiting prisons, jails, detention centers, reentry programs, listening to people's stories. I spent a day in a prison recently, and it was this life-changing experience where you understand that these are human beings that we're supposed to be rehabilitating and we're failing them. Is there a moment that stands out from that year that you carry with you when you do this work?
Oh, I carry so many stories with me. First of all, I experienced this from dealing with it in my own family. So we had folks that were locked up. We had friends and neighbors that were locked up. And so many people in our community have gotten really used to losing members of our community for long periods of time. And I think we're so used to it that we've become almost numb to it because it just happens so often, and it's decimated a lot of communities, a lot of families, and it doesn't have to be this way. And when I went on this tour, I met so many people that were dealing with addiction, so many people that were dealing with trauma, and a lot of times the reason why they're committing crimes is because of all the trauma that they've dealt with and because they've been victims of crime before. And you just came to understand when you met all these people that the system is broken and it's hurting people that have already been broken by life and by their circumstance. It's hurting them even more. And it just motivated me to get involved.
So we're at a time of historically low crime.
Yes.
And yet, one of the most radical members of the Senate has become our Attorney General, who's now going to reverse some of the efforts that have been made on criminal justice reform, and who wants to crack down on things like decriminalizing marijuana. We have a president who uses crime as a scapegoat all the time. Are we moving backwards? Are we failing to make a case about this to people?
Well, I think the lucky thing about the silver lining in the very dark cloud of Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump kind of being tough on crime and law and order candidates, the silver lining is that they actually don't control a lot of policy that affects most people. So most people are locked up in local and state jails and prisons. And a very small percentage of our total prisoners are actually in the federal prison system. And so most of the things that the president and the attorney general can do don't actually affect a large percentage of the people in jails and prisons right now. So a lot of the activism, which is a good thing right now.
Right.
It's not necessarily great when you have somebody that may be more pro-reform at the federal government level that, you'd want more things to happen more quickly. But in this period of time, it's good that a lot of things have to happen on the state and local level. So that's where our activism has to be. So we've been working with activists here in California. We've been working with folks in Texas. We've been working with folks in Florida. We've been working with folks in New York. We've been working with folks all over the country that are making dents in this system and making real change happen that's going to affect a lot of people's lives. And we can do that regardless of who's the president and regardless of who's the attorney general.
So I think there's a slow awakening, but probably too slow, to the understanding of the connection between race and mass incarceration. Mm-hmm. When you gave when you accepted the Oscar for Glory in Soma.
Right here.
That's cool. Was that better than right now?
Nothing could be better than right now. Nothing.
He's a pro. You said you're working on mass incarceration issues because you thought Martin Luther King would be focused on these issues if he were alive today. Why is that? What's the connection between race and mass incarceration?
Well, race has been tied to mass incarceration since the beginning. So as soon as the slaves were freed, folks were trying to find ways to contain the slaves again, to control their labor, to control their movement, to police them, to lynch them, all kinds of ways to control the movement of black people in America, because there was this fear of us, fear of what our bodies would do to them, and fear of us being close to their women, fears of all kinds of things that they believed about us at that time. And so they put laws into place to contain us and to constrain us and to make life as difficult as possible for us in America. And so a lot of the laws that we see now are still descendants of that time.
Yeah, I mean, we see efforts to legalize marijuana, even as there are millions of people of color in jail for those crimes in places like California.
And thank God for people like George Gascon in San Francisco, who, after the law was passed that we can recreationally use marijuana here in California, he said, we're not just going to, start from that point. We're going to go back and look at all these records of the people that have been locked up unjustly over the years. And we're going to clear their record. We're not going to make them jump through hoops to make it happen. We're just going to clear their record because they shouldn't have that record, because we as a society have decided that this drug is okay for recreational use, and we're not going to further punish people and keep a scarlet letter on people for the rest of their lives because they broke a law that we've deemed is unjust now.
Right. So
we hope that our LA DA will do the same thing, correct?
And figure out what's been going on with the permitting at the Beverly Center.
Yeah, that's it.
Which has just been ongoing. It's the paint job, as far as I can tell.
Second greatest civil rights issue of our time.
Two lanes of Cienega.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Yes.
It just went from brown to white.
How can you continue to inconvenience Lovett like this? I don't know.
It's awful.
John Legend also listens to Love It or Leave It.
I do.
Proof point. Tommy, ask a question.
So a lot of people here tonight, a lot of people listening at home, they care about justice. What can they do to help push policymakers to reform the criminal justice system to get things in a better place?
Well, it's like I said, it's about state and local elections in a lot of ways. We have to know our DAs. I did a program with the ACLU of California, which was all about knowing your DA. So you can look that up online and actually look who your DA is and understand what their policies have been, and if they're being progressive, if they're thinking about the community when they're enforcing the laws. Are they, doing like Gascon is doing in San Francisco? These are kind of things we can hold our local elected officials accountable for, and so we have to pay attention to those things. And I love that everybody's getting involved in the 2018 election. I love it. Because we have to be active on the state level if we want to control policy. There's so much that happens. And the Republicans, they were ahead of us on this over the last decade or so. They filled up these state houses. They gerrymandered the districts. They did everything they needed to do to seize power. And they put a lot of laws in place, like in Kansas, that really fucked up their state. And we can take this power back if we vote in these local elections. And criminal justice reform won't happen if we don't have a voice in these local and state elections.
Yeah, and we've even seen in places like Philadelphia that more progressive candidates have been able to win. And the
I was
centrality
involved in that election. I was involved in the Florida election. I was involved in Chicago. Whenever we have a progressive candidate that we find, we get behind them, we support them, and we try to get a message out to all the people that listen to us to pay attention to these elections and vote, because they're often in times when people aren't that focused on politics.
Right.
They're not usually in presidential year election time periods. So we have to really get people to focus, and that's what we're trying to do.